Have you ever wondered what secrets might be hiding in the places you least expect? Imagine spending years alone on the road, just you and your truck, when suddenly you find something that changes everything. Meet John, a trucker with over 15 years crossing America's highways, whose days blurred together in a routine of diesel stops and lonely miles. But one ordinary afternoon, while cleaning his cab, he stumbled upon a hidden letter tucked where no one was meant to find it. What he read inside didn't just shake him. It sent him on a journey he never saw coming. Stick with me, because what you're about to hear isn't just a story. It's a moment where one man's life took a turn so unexpected, you'll feel like you're right there with him. And trust me, what happens next will make you rethink the power of a single piece of paper. Now, I want to hear from you, because stories like John's remind us how life can change in an instant. Has something unexpected ever completely shifted your path? Maybe a note, a chance meeting, or a moment that stayed with you? Drop it in the comments below. Let's create a space where we share these powerful experiences together. And if this story hit you right in the feels, hit that like button. It helps more people find these real-life moments that connect us all. For those who aren't subscribed yet, join this growing family of road warriors and story lovers, because every click on that subscribe button means we keep bringing you more of these unforgettable journeys. Your voice here truly makes this channel what it is, a place where miles and memories collide. Now, let's get back to John, because what he did next will show you just how far one man's courage can go. John had just finished his usual post haul. Cab cleanup, running a rag behind the driver's seat where crumbs and coffee receipts collected over weeks on the road. That's when his fingers brushed against something that didn't belong. A folded envelope wedged deep in the crevice where the seat met the backrest, nearly invisible unless you knew exactly where to look. The paper felt strangely thick between his calloused fingers, slightly yellowed with age, carrying that distinct smell of time and diesel fumes. His name wasn't on it, just the words "for whoever finds this," scrawled in shaky handwriting that immediately set his pulse racing. Now I'm to go deeper into what happened next, because this wasn't just some random note. As John carefully peeled back the flap, the first line hit him like a freight train. "If you're reading this, I didn't make it home." The words blurred as his eyes darted down the page, each sentence revealing more about the truck's previous owner, a man who'd driven these same routes 20 years earlier, with a secret that never made it to its intended recipient. The letter spoke of regrets, of last chances missed, of a daughter in Omaha who never got the apology she deserved. John suddenly realized he wasn't just holding paper. He was holding someone's unfinished life, their final words trapped in this metal cocoon for decades. The cab felt smaller somehow, the hum of the engine fading as John grappled with the weight of what to do next. Part of him wanted to fold it back up, pretend he never saw it, keep rolling down the interstate like nothing changed. But another part, the part that remembered his own father's last words, knew some truths demand to be heard, no matter how late they arrive. He turned the key, but instead of heading toward his scheduled delivery, John found himself pulling up maps to Nebraska, the letter burning a hole in his shirt pocket. What happened next would test everything John thought he knew about strangers, about second chances, about how one moment of curiosity can unravel years of stories left untold. And friends, that's where this gets really interesting, because the address in that letter led somewhere nobody could have predicted. Drop a truth in the comments if you've ever stumbled upon something that changed your path. Let's keep unraveling this story together. The highway stretched endlessly before John as he pulled over at a rest stop, the letter trembling in his hands under the dim cab light. Every word cut deeper than the last, revealing a story of a trucker named Doan who knew his time was running out. The letter confessed to things left unsaid, to a daughter named Sarah who grew up thinking her father didn't care, when in truth he carried her picture in his wallet for every mile of every haul. The most heartbreaking part came midway down the second page, where Doan admitted he'd been sending money secretly for years, but never had the courage to face her after walking out when she was just 6 years old. Now I want to go even deeper into this revelation, because what John discovered next would challenge everything we think we know about forgiveness. The letter contained specific details only someone truly connected to Sarah would know, like the scar above her left eyebrow from a childhood fall, and her love for strawberry milkshakes that Doan would buy her during rare visits. But the real gut punch came in the final paragraph, where Doan revealed he'd been diagnosed with terminal cancer 2 months before writing this, and that his greatest regret wasn't the miles driven, but the conversations avoided. As John sat there in that quiet truck stop, surrounded by the sounds of idling engines and distant highway noise, he realized this wasn't just about delivering a letter anymore. This was about restoring what time had broken, about proving it's never too late to make things right. The address scribbled at the bottom led to a small apartment complex in Omaha, but what John couldn't have known yet was that Sarah had moved 7 times since this letter was written, that she'd stopped using her father's last name, and that finding her would require peeling back layers of pain and protection built over 20 years. The journey John was about to undertake would reveal more than just one family's hidden truth. It would expose how the roads we choose and the words we leave unspoken create ripples that last generations. And the most surprising part, the part that still gives me chills every time I tell the story, is what Sarah had been doing for a living all those years, without realizing she was following in her father's footsteps. Drop a "never too late" in the comments if you believe in second chances, because what happens next will show just how powerful redemption can be when we dare to deliver the message's life gives us. John stared at the faded photograph that fell from the folded letter, a black and white image of a little girl with pigtails, sitting on a truck's hood, her smile brighter than the Nebraska sun behind her. The back reads Sarah's 6th birthday, June 1987, in shaky capital letters. Now I want to go deeper into Dawn's story, the man behind these words that were never meant to gather dust behind a truck seat. Dawn Murphy had been hauling freight across the Midwest for 30 years when he got the diagnosis that would change everything. The doctors gave him 6 months, but the cancer moved faster than any deadline he'd ever raced against. In his final weeks, between pain medications and restless nights at truck stops, he penned this confession on motel stationery, slipping it into the very truck he knew would outlast him. What John didn't know yet was that Dawn had chosen this specific rig deliberately, a 1985 Peterbilt that had been in his family since new, the same truck he'd promised Sarah he'd teach her to drive one day. The real tragedy wasn't just the letter, going undiscovered for 2 decades, but how close Sarah had been to finding it herself. After Dawn's passing, the truck changed hands 3 times before landing with John. But here's the detail that still haunts me. Sarah had actually worked the front desk at a Wyoming truck stop where this very rig sat. Overnight in 2003, she'd served coffee to the driver without realizing she was looking at her father's legacy, at the answers to questions that kept her awake for years. Now John held all these disconnected pieces: the photograph, the apology, the unfulfilled promise of reconciliation. And as he pulled onto I-80 west toward Omaha, he couldn't shake the Omaha feeling this was more than coincidence. The road had a way of circling back on itself, of delivering messages when we least expect them, but most need to hear them. What waited in Omaha wasn't just a woman who'd spent her life wondering why her father left, but a series of revelations about Dawn's final months that would rewrite Sarah's understanding of everything. Drop a message in the comments if you've ever felt the universe trying to tell you something, because what John was about to discover would prove some connections can't be broken, no matter how many years or miles come between them. The most surprising twist was still ahead. waiting in a small Omaha diner where Sarah Murphy now worked the morning shift, unaware her father's words were finally coming home. The steering wheel felt heavy in John's hands as he sat at the Omaha. City limits sign, the letter burning a hole in his shirt pocket. He could still make his Chicago delivery on time if he turned north now, could pretend he never found those handwritten pages that weren't meant for him. The rational choice was clear. Keep moving forward like every good trucker knows to do. But something about that photo of little Sarah, about Don's desperate words scribbled in fading ink, made his foot stay on the brake pedal a moment longer than necessary. Now, I want to go deeper into that crossroads moment, because what happened next would define more than just this delivery run. John pulled into a diner parking lot, the kind of place truckers know have the strongest coffee and the most honest advice. As he spread Don's letter across the Formica tabletop next to his eggs, the waitress paused mid-pour, her eyes locking onto the photograph. You won't believe what she said next, her voice dropping to a whisper as she pointed to the name tag on. Her uniform, Sarah, same as the girl in the picture. But here's where it gets really interesting. This wasn't the Sarah from the letter, just a coincidence that felt like a cosmic nudge. That's when John made his decision, watching the morning. Sun glint off his rig in the parking lot. He called dispatch and did something he'd never done in 15 years of spotless deliveries. He requested emergency personal time. The look on his boss's face must have been priceless when John, the guy who once drove through a blizzard to make a deadline, said he needed to chase a ghost from 20 years ago. But some journeys aren't measured in miles or paychecks, and this one was pulling him toward Omaha's north side with a force stronger than any deadline. What John didn't know yet was that finding the right Sarah Murphy would require walking into a run-down apartment complex where Don's last Christmas card had been returned unopened, where neighbors would eye him suspiciously until he showed them that decades-old photograph. And the most surprising detail, the one that still gives me chills, was waiting taped to Sarah's current refrigerator, a child's crayon, drawing of a big rig with the words Daddy's Truck, scrawled across the top in wobbly letters. Droppa, keep going. In the comments, if you've ever followed a feeling that defied logic, because what John was about to discover would prove that sometimes the longest roads lead us exactly where we're meant to be. The real Sarah was closer than he imagined, working a night shift just 3 blocks away, unaware her life was about to change at a dingy diner counter where a stranger would slide a coffee cup toward her with a photograph tucked beneath the saucer. The engine hummed as John rolled through Omaha's north side. The address from Don's letter leading him to a weathered auto shop that still had a 1980s Peterbilt logo fading on its sign. Now I want to go deeper into this search, because what happened inside that garage would change everything. The bell above the door jingled as John stepped into the smell of grease and nostalgia, where an old mechanic named Walt looked up from under a hood and froze mid-wrench turn. His eyes locked onto the photograph in John's hand before a single word was spoken, and that's when John knew he'd come to the right place. Walt's hands shook as he took the picture, his thumb brushing over little Sarah's face like he was touching a ghost. Turns out Walt wasn't just some random mechanic. He'd been Don's best friend since their Army days, the one person who knew the whole story. Over coffee that tasted like it had been brewing since the Reagan administration, Walt revealed secrets even the letter hadn't told, like how Don would park outside Sarah's school on his routes just to catch glimpses of her, how he'd paid her college tuition anonymously through Walt, and the real reason he walked away all those years ago. The shop's back office became a time capsule, with Walt pulling out dusty boxes of Don's belongings he'd kept for this very moment. There were birthday cards never sent, a tiny cowboy boots Sarah left in the truck once, and most heartbreaking of all, a notebook where Don practiced writing letters to her every year on her birthday, none of which he ever had the courage to mail. John sat there surrounded by these fragments of a father's love, realizing his simple mission to deliver a letter had become something much bigger. As the afternoon light slanted through the garage windows, Walt dropped the bombshell that would send John on the final leg of his journey. Sarah wasn't working some diner night shift anymore. She'd become a nurse at Omaha Regional, the same hospital where Doane spent his last days under an assumed name. The universe had come full circle in ways nobody could have predicted, and John's truck was now pointed toward a reunion 20 years in the making. Drop a full circle in the comments if you believe nothing in life is truly coincidence. Because what happened when John pulled into that hospital parking lot would prove that love has its own navigation system, one that guides us home no matter how lost we get. The real surprise was waiting on the third-floor West Wing, where Sarah Murphy's name tag hung on a door marked head nurse. Completely unaware her father's final words were riding up in the elevator toward her. The hospital elevator doors opened to reveal a bustling nurse's station, where a woman with Don's sharp blue eyes was reviewing charts. John hesitated, the letter suddenly heavy in his hands as he watched Sarah Murphy in action, her efficient movements belying the childhood pain hidden beneath that professional exterior. Now I want to go deeper into this moment of truth, because what happened when John finally approached her would reveal layers of this story even Walt hadn't known. John waited until her shift break, following Sarah to the hospital rooftop garden, where she ate lunch alone every day. When he quietly said her father's name, her coffee cup slipped, dark liquid spreading across the concrete like the years of unanswered questions between them. The photograph of her 6-year-old self made her breath catch, but it was Dawn's final words that truly shattered her defenses. As Sarah's fingers traced her father's handwriting for the first time in decades, tears fell onto passages about birthday presents secretly left at foster homes, about nights he'd slept in his truck outside her middle school just to feel close, about the cancer diagnosis that finally gave him courage to write what he'd never said aloud. Here's the detail that changes everything. Sarah had actually cared for Doane during his final days without knowing it. The gruff patient in room 312 who'd always asked about her shift and left extravagant tips for the nursing staff. The man she joked with about baseball and bad hospital food had been memorizing her face, leaving her his entire life insurance policy under the name Donald Murphy, instead of the alias he'd used to check in. As realization dawned, Sarah's knees buckled, and John barely caught her as 20 years of misunderstood silence collapsed in that rooftop moment. But the story doesn't end there, because when Sarah led John back to the nurse's locker room, she opened her locker to reveal a yellowed newspaper clipping about a trucker who'd anonymously paid a stranger's medical bills years ago, a story she'd kept because it reminded her of the father she wished she'd had. Neither of them could have guessed the trucker was Doane, completing a circle of kindness that would forever change. How Sarah saw her past drop a circle complete in the comments if you've ever discovered a hidden connection that rewrote your story, because what happened next between Sarah and John would prove that sometimes the people who change our lives arrive in the most unexpected ways. The hospital intercom was calling Dr. Murphy to the E, but Sarah wasn't moving yet, her fingers still clutching the letter as she whispered the words she'd waited a lifetime to say. He did love me after all. The hospital chapel was silent, except for Sarah's quiet sobs as she clutched her father's letter to her chest, the weight of 20 years of misunderstanding finally lifting. John stood awkwardly by the door, suddenly aware he'd become part of something far bigger than a simple delivery. Now, I want to go deeper into how this moment reshaped them both, because what happened in the days that followed would prove that some encounters alter our paths forever. Sarah's hands no longer trembled when she showed John the box of keepsakes she'd saved, the few childhood mementos she had of her father. There was the faded postcard from Wyoming she'd always assumed was random, now realizing it marked one of his routes, the dates matching his logbook entries Walt had kept. But the real transformation came when she led John to the hospital basement storage, where unclaimed patient belongings gathered dust. In a box labeled Donald M., she found his old work boots, the same ones from her earliest memories, still caked with dried mud from his final journey. For John, the impact was quieter, but just as profound. Watching Sarah piece together her father's true story made him pull over at the next payphone to call his own estranged daughter, the one he hadn't spoken to since she left for college. The words came easier than he expected, maybe because Don's letter had shown him how quickly chances slip away. By the time he hung up, they'd planned their first visit in 3 years, and for the first time in decades, John felt like he was driving toward something instead of just away. The road became different after that. Where once John saw only mile markers and deadlines, now he noticed the roadside memorials, the truck stop conversations, the handwritten signs at diners searching for long-lost relatives. He started carrying extra stamps in his glove compartment after Sarah mentioned how many letters go undelivered each year. And somewhere outside Des Moines, he even helped a waitress track down her birth father using tricks Walt had taught him. Sarah framed her father's letter and hung it in her clinic office, where patients often asked about the weathered pages behind glass. She'd smile and say it's a reminder that healing isn't always about medicine. Sometimes it's about truth arriving just in time. And every so often, when an old Peterbilt rumbled past the hospital, she'd pause just a moment, wondering if another John was out there delivering messages the world thought were lost forever. Drop a message below if you've ever been the one to deliver or receive a second chance, because the road doesn't end here. There's still one last twist to this story, one that connects back to that diner where John first decided to change course, where a new journey begins every time someone chooses to open an envelope instead of looking away. The open road stretched before John's windshield like it always had, but nothing looked the same anymore. Those yellow highway lines didn't just mark miles now. They connected stories, the kind that hide in truck stop booths and diner counters and the quiet spaces between destinations. Now I want to go deeper into what the road taught him, because the real journey wasn't about delivering a letter. It was about how one act of curiosity can unravel years of silence and stitch together something new. Sarah's voice still echoed in John's mind from their last phone call, when she'd read him the letter she wrote to her father and left at his graveside. She'd included details only now making sense, like the mysterious tuition payments and the truck that always seemed to idle outside her high school plays. But here's what stays with me. She told John that forgiving her father felt like unlocking a door inside herself she didn't know was closed. That's the thing about roads. They don't just lead places. They change the people traveling them. John kept Don's old route log in his glove compartment now, not for navigation, but for reminder. Sometimes he'd pull over at the same greasy spoon where this all began, watching other truckers come and go, wondering what stories sat unnoticed in their cabs. He started noticing more too, the way waitresses' eyes lingered on certain customers, the unopened letters pinned behind gas station counters, the way a simple question like, "You all right?" could unravel someone's carefully packed silence. The road's greatest lesson wasn't in the grand gestures, but the small turns. The decision to ask one more question, to knock on one more door, to believe a stranger's story matters. Sarah proved that by starting a support group at the hospital for families dealing with unresolved loss, using her father's letter as proof that closure sometimes arrives in ways we can't predict. And John, well, he still made his deliveries on time, but now his rig carried extra stamps and envelopes, just in case the road offered another chance to deliver what really needed arriving. Drop a road lesson below if you've ever found meaning in the detours, because the story doesn't end when the engine cuts off. There's always another mile ahead, another diner light glowing in the dark, another moment waiting to remind us that the most important deliveries aren't the ones marked on any manifest. The highway keeps whispering its truths to those willing to listen, and John's rig is still out there somewhere, rolling toward the next story that needs finding. The highway never really ends. It just leads us to new stories waiting to be discovered. Now I want to hear yours, because roads connect us in ways we don't always see coming. Has life ever surprised you with a moment that changed everything? Maybe a chance meeting, a found letter, or an unexpected act of kindness that shifted your path. Drop your story below with the word highway, because just like John discovered, sometimes the most important messages come from fellow travelers. For everyone who loves these real-life journeys that remind us what connects people, hit that subscribe button so you never miss the next story from the road. And don't forget to tap the bell, because you never know when the next unforgettable encounter will roll into view. The road keeps going, and so do these stories, with new miles and new revelations just around the next bend. Dot your stories and support fuel this journey, turning miles into meaning and strangers into friends. So keep sharing those road lessons below. And remember, the next life-changing letter might be waiting in the most ordinary place, for someone exactly like you to find it. If this story stayed with you, like it did with me, hit that like button, so I know these miles matter to you too. For everyone who made it to the end of this road, drop a "still riding" in the comments, so I can thank you personally for being part of this journey. This channel rolls out real stories just like this every week, so if you want more meaningful miles, tap subscribe and join our growing family of road story lovers. I've got another video ready for you right over here, one about a diner waitress who found a life-changing tip in a coffee cup, and something tells me you'll want to ride along for that one. Until next time, keep your eyes open and your heart ready, because you never know what meaningful message might be waiting for you just up the road.